So, bigger picture on all of this, when you look at the ICE operations and the protests, they're certainly reviving the debate we've had, for years in this country over sanctuary cities. Let's talk about that now. Cities like Los Angeles, but also Boston, Chicago, Denver, New York, they count as sanctuaries. No single definition, but they usually place some limit on cooperating with the federal immigration enforcement authorities. So let's bring in now Lora Ries, who's director at Heritage, the Heritage Border Security and Immigration Center. Welcome, Laura. Thank you for coming on. So what should we be thinking about here? Because like I said, we've been debating this forever, right? And we started covering Friday and what was going on in LA, and we saw the agents going in. We watched them make arrests live, but then we watched outside where things got hairy in a hurry. What about some of these cities and maybe changes you think should be put in place? What would you say big picture about sanctuary cities?
Well, many of the leaders in these cities will talk out of both sides of their mouth. They will say, well, immigration is federal law, and we're not going to enforce the federal law. The feds need to do that. And yet, when the federal government tries to enforce those laws and execute them, then we have sanctuary leaders getting in the way and sometimes even obstructing or interfering with federal operations. The one thing that the Trump administration, Tom Homan, is really asking for right now is to let federal agents into the state and local prisons to transfer custody before the state and local jurisdiction is about to release a criminal who that sanctuary jurisdiction already decided should be in jail, turn them over to ICE rather than release them back onto the street to harm more citizens in the community. And yet, when sanctuary jurisdictions refuse to do that, then they are harming the very communities that sanctuary leaders claim they are seeking to protect.
Well, I had an interesting conversation on our show last night with the mayor, right? It was the mayor of Glendale in California. And the reason it was interesting is because he said they did have a cooperation agreement in place with ICE, and they were cooperating, and their facility, detention facility or prison, was being used with ICE. But they broke that off, right? And basically he said he was afraid that protesters were going to move in, that he was going to be associated in a smaller town without the resources with what's going on, and he thought it wasn't in the best interest of his town. So it was kind of an interesting, in other words, he said, we want to work with them, or we did work with them, but now we're not. What would your reaction to something like that be?
I would encourage jurisdictions to continue to cooperate with ICE. If ICE is asking for, by placing a detainer on a criminal alien that jurisdiction already decided should be in jail, then it's in everyone's interest to turn that person over to ICE, and it makes communities safer.
Okay, now, last hour, there's a couple of things that happened today. So the mayor, and Alex talked about this, had a news conference. There were a bunch of mayors there. There was one guy that stood up, one of the local mayors, who said he was a Marine himself, and he was, he's a Democrat, liberal guy who was not in favor of using the military. So I'm wondering what your favor of view on that is and how it works into this debate in terms of jurisdictions and what's necessary. Paul Rieckhoff was a regular guest with us. He was deployed with the National Guard himself as part of his service years ago, and he said this in our last hour of coverage. Take a listen.
In my view, what's happening in California is an escalation because the governor said no. The LAPD said no. They said, we've got this. And when you go against that, you're putting our troops in the middle of a political squabble. Bringing in the Marines is bringing in the hammer. Bringing in the 82nd Airborne is bringing in the hammer. And if you're going to do it, it has to be because it's absolutely necessary.
So what about that part? The president moving in with the troops when the local officials say we don't want them?
Well, the mayor and the governor clearly didn't have this as they claimed they did. They were hands off for hours and now days. And so this is about riots. It's not even about immigration necessarily or ICE. It's about riots. It's about people attacking federal agents and police, attacking federal property and buildings, endangering people, blocking highways. That's what this is about.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.